All right, I think we have a critical mass here. So thank you for joining the webinar today, talking about functionality and workflows for financial advisors. Some of you have been users for a very long time. Some of you are just starting to use Koyfin. So there's going to be a mix of reviewing kind of the most popular features and some of the newer features that we just launched. Let me share my screen and go right into the agenda because you definitely don't want to see my face and you want to see Koyfin. So this is cool. This is the agenda for today. We're going to start with some logistics. And the biggest thing to know is that the webinar is being recorded. You will receive a recording of the webinar after it's over. So you don't have to take notes and screenshots and stuff like that. If you want to, you can, but we are recording this webinar and we are going to send it to all of those that registered after the webinar. We are going to cover model portfolios as the first item. Model portfolios is something that's very integral to advisors' workflows, something that we launched a couple of weeks ago and have had really strong traction in. And we'll review some of that functionality and the features that are coming up that we're working on. We're also going to cover the workflow for popular financial advisor features like watchlist sharing, screener, ETF valuation, ETF and mutual fund snapshots. Then we're going to go to Q&A and think about get questions from anyone who has specific questions. We can do that over chat. So you have a Q&A chat button that you could post your questions in, or you can request to speak if you want everyone to hear your voice. And that way we'll just get you on the line. I also have my colleague, Connor McNeil, joining us for this webinar. He is in charge of some of our community and does a bunch of stuff related to social media, as well as some product work as well. And so he'll be helping out with the chat functionality and he'll be available to answer any questions as well. So let's get started with kind of the first feature that I wanted to walk you through, which is model portfolios. So when I go to Koyfin, the model portfolios tab is located right here. The general kind of principle of model portfolios is it allows you to create a bunch of model portfolios to follow that many of you will put your clients in or keep track of different investment themes using these model portfolios. The way you can create a model portfolio is clicking this create new button. These are all the model portfolios that I've created, but if you click the create new button, you'll get this creation screen. And there's a couple of items here. One is you have to fill out kind of the details of your model portfolio. So this is my model portfolio for the webinar, is what I'll call it. It's in US dollars. You put an initial value. You put in a benchmark here that right now is an ETF or mutual fund. We are going to allow you to create custom benchmarks by inputting another model portfolio here. So if I wanted to create a benchmark of 50% stocks and 50% bonds, I would basically create a model portfolio that's called benchmark 50% equity, 50% bonds. And I would use that model portfolio. That feature is coming out in the next 2 to 3 weeks. But right now you have to put an ETF or mutual fund. So if I put SPY, you do have to right now indicate the start date of when your portfolio starts. And that is designed so that you can really contain the statistics or the risk metrics for the portfolio. So if you want the risk metrics like standard deviation and drawdown and things like that to start at a certain date or only be confined to a certain date, that's what the start date is for. And so you do have to explicitly state a start date. We know that other platforms kind choose a automatic start date based on the holdings, but right now in this current version, you do have to explicitly state a start date. So my start date is January 2013. I rebalance, let's say, on a quarterly basis. My advisor fee is 2% because I'm a really good advisor. And my, actually maybe 2% because I'm a really bad advisor. And my collection period is quarterly. And then in here is where you get to choose your holdings. So let's say I'm SPY and I'm VOO because I want to use 2 different benchmarks. Oops, did not work. And then I want to use TLT as my bond allocation. And in here is where you kind of start putting your holdings. So let's say I'm 50%, 10%, 35%, and then 5% cash. And so what this tells me right now is that my holdings on December 31st, 2012, notice here the start date is a month, is January 2013, and the actual date, the start date is the actual day. It's the day before the starting month. So my holdings on January 31st, 2012 were these allocation. They're going to be rebalanced quarterly. And this is kind of explicitly my allocation today. So if I don't change anything, this is saying my allocation today is December 31st, 2012. Sorry, my allocation December 31st, 2012 was the following. And then today, at the present moment, it is the following as well. If I wanted to have a rebalance period, so let's say right before COVID, I was very smart and thought something was odd was happening. And let's say on January 31st, when we heard the first news reports, let's say that I started to panic about the market. I know financial advisors typically don't change allocations based on news events, but we're just going to go through this example. So I went to 10% cash. I went to 30% SPY, kept us at 10%, and then the remaining I put in bonds. So that's a 50% allocation. And then being kind of like how the smart person that I am, I actually, right after COVID, when everything I knew was going to be fine on January 30th, I went back to SPY and sort of made this 60% and kept us at 10%. And bonds were very overvalued in my opinion. So I went to 20%. And I'm going to make this 0% cash. And notice here, I do have my allocation of what it is. So it tells me kind of like, hey, your allocation is not 100%. And so let's say I went to 70%. And again, explicitly or implicitly, this is telling me that this is my allocation now. So I changed my allocation on June 30th. And that means up until today, this has been my allocation. And let's say I wanted to keep that. So this is going to be kind of like my allocation of what I want to do. I do want to point out that if you don't want to manually input these things, we do have an upload CSV button here. And so if you hit that button, we give you an example of a CSV that you can upload, but basically it's the date, the tickers, and the weights. And so if you have a dynamic allocation historically, you could upload that. If you only have one allocation, you still, again, have to upload the date, which is the start date. But that's how you would upload a CSV. If you have a client account that you want to upload, or you have a bunch of model portfolios in Excel that you're tracking, you could upload them here. And let me create my portfolio and see what that looks like. And Chris, I just checked out your question. You asked if you could import a model portfolio, and we just covered that. So that's how you import it via CSV. The stats I have here are kind of some tabs. So I have my summary tab here with what I hold. So just my allocation today. I have some performance stats here. I have my current weights. I have my target weights. So remember, I'm rebalancing quarterly. So my current weights drifted since my last rebalance last quarter. And that SPY looks like outperformed, bonds underperformed. And these are my target weights that are going to be rebalanced at the end of the quarter as well. So it shows you the difference. The performance chart shows you kind of what's been happening. So if I look at my start date, remember I started in January 2013. SPY is up 269%. My model portfolio is up 118%. Obviously, I am pretty diversified here, so this is not a great benchmark. One thing that you could use if you wanted to use a more balanced benchmark is you could change this to like a Vanguard balance fund. That would give you I forget the exact allocation here. If you Google Vanguard 60/40 benchmark, that will give you a more balanced fund, but this could be, let me save those changes and kind of show you what that looked like. And so now when I go back to my portfolio, this comparison looks a little bit better, right? We have my portfolio here, which is called Model Portfolio Webinar, versus the Vanguard Balance Fund. It looks a little bit better. So this is a nice way to compare the two. We also have the ability to look at rolling annual returns. So if you wanted to look at the rolling 3-year period, or the rolling 1-year period, or the rolling 5-year period, you could then start seeing where at any point in time, this is the previous 5-year return, and you could compare these two things and see how they performed. We also have a historical returns chart. So basically, what's been the historical returns over different time periods, what's been the historical returns over different months, just to kind of see where the best months and the worst months are. You could do that for the portfolio, you could do that for the benchmark, and you could do that on a net basis as well. And then lastly, we do have risk metrics that you could look at. So for the portfolio, these are all the different risk metrics. To the extent you're very quantitative and really want to know about the skewness and the Sorrentino ratio and all the other kind of very specific things, those are all located here in the risk section. We do give you kind of what it is for the benchmark as well, so you could compare those. And then we do give you this table for drawdowns versus the peak. And so this is the drawdowns of the portfolio versus the benchmark. These are the top drawdowns, so just kind of showing you what the top drawdowns in the portfolio are, and some stress tests for different events of kind of how the portfolio performed during various times. And going back, so these are kind of the tabs we have today. Going back, you can create as many portfolios as you want to the extent you're on the Pro plan. One thing you could do is you could duplicate portfolios. So let's say I wanted to look at this market portfolio webinar and I duplicated it, and I wanted to kind of like say, hey, this is now my duplicated portfolio, but in here, when I click on it and I go to edit portfolio, let's say I want to do save, let's say international bond. So in kind of like instead of TLT, I actually want a Vanguard total bond index. And I don't know which one of these is international. Let me just pick a mutual fund here to the extent that can show you how to mix ETFs and mutual funds. So this is a mutual fund here. And now I'm going to sort of allocate 10%, 35%, 50%, and then 20%. And if I save these changes, it will now run this analysis for my new allocations for the Vanguard International Fund. And then I could go back and compare these two statistics. So I could see here kind of just on a return basis, the performance over the past 5 years has been better for my version 1 portfolio. And over the past 10 years, my original portfolio has done better than thinking about international bonds. So this is might not be the best practical example, but you sort of get the idea of how to duplicate a portfolio and how to come up with different iterations of a portfolio. So that's really kind of exciting functionality that we've released that has gotten a ton of traction. Let me just kind of go through some of the upcoming features that we have for model portfolios, because we do get a lot of questions on, what are you going to be doing with model portfolios? This is version 1. We are going to have custodian integration. We're starting with Schwab. So that's kind of something we're working on now, so that you can look at your potential clients' holdings on Koyfin using this integration. We're going to allow you to do custom benchmarks with the flow that I described before by creating a custom portfolio, and then by creating a model portfolio and then using that model portfolio as a benchmark. We're going to have some information on fees and dividend yields, which is something that's sorely missing today. So we're going to put that in pretty quickly and pretty soon. We're going to have asset class, sector, and country exposure snapshots. So basically giving you this information for portfolio. This is something we don't have today because we are switching our data provider to Morningstar from Lipper. And so we have to wait for that to happen until we start tackling this. So this should be out, I'd say, by the end of the year. Holdings X-ray to see which stocks you have the underlying exposure to. And so drilling through the mutual fund and ETF holdings to see kind of what the portfolio holds. We're going to have workflows to compare model portfolios. So how do you compare model portfolios one versus another in terms of performance and risk? Client proposal tools, being able to kind of take these and print them out into a PDF so that you could really articulate to your clients what the value proposition of your model portfolio versus what they own today. Collaboration tools where you'll be able to work on model portfolios as a team, be able to share model portfolios, and then input custom time series to in case you have a fund where you have some allocation that isn't in Koyfin because it's not publicly traded, we're going to let you create a custom series and then use that in the model portfolio tool. I'm going to pause there, and I see that we have a lot of questions. So let me just look at some of these questions. So Andrew asks, can you import a total a return stream for private investment? So we just answered that with that we're gonna, that's on the roadmap. Consider adding sleeves so that when you update. So Rags says consider adding sleeves so that when you update the equity sleeve and bond sleeves, it applies to multiple portfolios. Definitely working on that. So it's kind of using portfolios within portfolios. So we'll be doing that, and probably should be on my list as well. That's on our roadmap for sure. Will you be adding individual bond QSIPs? Is a question from Bill. Individual bond QSIPs is on our roadmap, but I'll be frank that it's not in the near-term roadmap. Probably second half of next year is when we'll get to it. Just a whole big undertaking with getting bond data, QSIP data, reference data, and that's something we want to tackle, but it's something we have to map out. Is it possible to see ROE of ETF historically? I'll get to that in a second when I talk about ETFs. Dwayne wants to know, can you break into industry, sub-industries, industry groups? We're going to be doing that with the allocation tab that I mentioned before. And Andreas wants to know, will there be data for non-US ETFs? We do have non-US ETFs today in the platform, but we don't have the holdings. So that's maybe the biggest thing that's missing. But if there's any non-US ETFs that we are missing, please reach out to our help desk or reach out to me. My email is on the bottom of the screen, rob@koyfin.com. So please email me and let me know if there's any bond ETFs, if there's any international ETFs that we're missing, and we definitely love to include those or investigate how to get that data source. And then Rags is asking, can you import ticker weights for subsequent allocations or just initial? Rags, you could import subsequent allocations. So you could dynamically import a list when you go to create new and upload CSV. I think the CSV file here, the example file, will give you a way to dynamically show allocation. So the way it would work is it'd be SPY 40% and then a date, TLT 60% and a date, and then it'd be SPY 45% another date, and then TLT 55% another date. So you would dynamically import a list with different dates, and that would import into our tool and sort of populate the portfolio. Okay, so let's sort of move on from model portfolios. Just wanted to talk about a couple more things that some of you asked about in the Q&A, or sorry, in the registration form when we talked about the functionality, and these are some of the kind of highlights of the popular features. So one thing that definitely is one of our most popular features is the watchlist functionality. It's the ability to create a watch list and really set any sort of column that you want here for the variable. So right now, this is my Rob's watch list, which is an equity watch list. So there's a lot of different equity columns that I have here. I could choose any of these kind of valuation or fundamental columns like income statement, balance sheet, cash flow, and add them to the selected columns. I could also save different configuration of columns as a watch list view. So if I wanted to create a new view and I wanted to create this like my market portfolio view in my watch list, I could just add the columns that I want, whatever they are, and then save them as a view. And then these are my different views. So for stocks, I have these different valuation metrics that I like to look at. I also like to look at my kind of standard view, which is really nice, which is just some standard metrics. You can also, I do have a bunch of kind of ETF watch lists. So this is one of my ETF watch lists where I have the different ETFs and then a bunch of ETF columns selected here that are related to ETFs. So net expense ratio, AUM, dividend yield, stuff like that. I also have a mutual fund list. So these are my mutual funds that I've selected. And again, I have all my different mutual fund formulas here, like total return over the past 1 year, 3 year, 5 year. And you could find all these columns here by either browsing through the different segments here, like price and performance, or if you type in like total return here, then we'll kind of like show you the different availabilities of columns here. If I type in performance, this will show me the total return annualized performance that's available here. So it's sometimes a little bit tricky to find the columns, but if you browse here and try to click into some of these segments, and you could always, again, email us if you have any questions. The email is either Rob or help@koyfin.com. We also have this feedback button where you could email us, and that goes directly to our help desk as well. So kind of the trick is to select and find these columns, and then you could save them as a view. You could also group these columns, these tickers together. And so the group functionality is you could create a custom group here, or you can group by asset type or geographic focus is on the mutual fund level, or on an ETF level, you could group by these different levels. So different ways of grouping these assets. And then a really kind of interesting new feature that we recently rolled out is called the sharing feature, which, no surprise, allows you to share a watch list. So, for example, this is my portfolio that I have, and I'll have a portfolio here. So this is my list of tickers here that I have my quantity, average cost, and market value and weight. So all these kind of portfolio tickers or portfolio columns are located here under portfolio tools. If you input these columns, so for example, if I input quantity, my weight gets calculated. That's what the typewriter means. That means it's inputted. I have to type that in, and everything else gets calculated by the system. So if I put in my average cost, I'll know my total gain. If I put in my purchase date, then I'll know my compounded return and stuff like that, or annualized return. And so I have this view set up with my portfolio and some metrics here for weight and cost. And then the way I would share this portfolio is I kind of click share and then put in an email here of another Koyfin user, and that would get shared to them. When the user, when you share this with someone, so for example, when I shared this with Brian will receive an email, and he'll have the ability to add that watch list to his portfolio. And then the other thing the recipient can do to see that is in this top tool in the menu here under my profile, my data, there is a shared with me button here. So these are all the shared, the files, the watch lists that were shared with me. Let me show you how this works. So Connor shared these watch lists with me. What I would do is I would click on asset class total returns. This would kind of bring me to this initial screen. It would tell me like, hey, asset class total returns was shared with me. What do you want to do with this? Do you want to either A, not do anything, B, save it to your watch list so that you could access it, or C, do you want to duplicate it into basically to your own watch list? And the difference here is that if I save it to my own watch list, that means Connor and I are sharing the watch list. And so if we're both writers or editors of the watch list, we both make changes. If I duplicate this file to my watch list, that means it's my own file now. Connor doesn't have any control over it. I duplicated it to my own system or to my own file system. And so it sort of breaks off. And then the other thing that you can, so let me save this to my watch list. And so now this is kind of like something that Connor and I are sharing. Note here that you can change the view. So make sure you have the right view selected. Sometimes the views are not the views that you share, which is something we have to fix. But sometimes the original person will share watch list with a view and you'll receive it in a different view. And there's some confusion there that we have to fix, but just note that the view is there. And now Connor and I are both sharing the watch list here. So if I add a ticker or I remove a column or whatever it is, we're both sharing a watch list, just like a shared document. And so this creates a really interesting way to be able to share portfolios, be able to share assets, be able to share watch list and any sort of tracking that's happening. So that's kind of the important watch list sharing functionality. Next, related to that, I wanted to talk to you about the screening tool. So the screening tool is a way to find different securities. If you hit the plus button here, you can screen for stocks or ETFs or mutual funds. So you could decide what you're screening for. Since we have a lot of financial advisors here, let me screen for some ETFs or maybe, I'll screen for some ETFs. So you define your universe here. So if I wanted to, for example, think about different funds. So let's say I'm only looking for dimensional funds. I would put that here, and that would tell me, okay, there's 33 ETFs that are by dimensional. If I wanted to add other ones, so let's say I wanted to add Vanguard, and use that, that'll give me a lot more ETFs. So this is a way to kind of narrow down your universe. You could also search by description. So if I wanted to search for, let's say, gold in the description, I don't know, there's probably no Vanguard gold ETFs, maybe growth. There's 66 matches of ETFs that fall into the growth or have the keyword growth in them. You could also search by ETF category. So I have kind of like all these categories that I can search for: equity, commodity, whatever it is. And then I can also search for focus. So focus is maybe a little bit more granular, in that you can think about the different strategies that are here. These categories today are Lipper categories. And so they may be a little bit confusing to folks, and we are switching to Morningstar categories, which I think are a little bit more familiar to y'all. So that's going to be out pretty shortly as well. But right now, it's sort of the Lipper categories that we have available. And then you get to, once you narrow down your universe, this tells you how many stocks match there. You could add other different criteria. So if you wanted to, for example, search for total fees, that would be under, I'll call expenses here. That would be under total expenses. So here are my total expenses between 3 basis points and 47 basis points in my universe that I've selected. So dimensional funds and Vanguard are pretty low cost. Let me do everything that's below 20 bips. That would give me 53 matches. And let me see funds that are price and performance. I'm going to look at total return annualized, and let's do everything over the past 5 years that has generated at least 10%. And so that tells me there's 14 funds that have generated at least 10%. I'm going to give the screen in terms of 5-year returns. And that would show up here in terms of the funds that are Vanguard or dimensional funds that have outperformed or have at least the threshold, the 10% threshold that I had selected before. So this is a great way to screen for funds. Once I have this, I could save this to a watch list, or I could download this to a CSV. So there's a bunch of stuff that you can go from there. So the screening tool is also available for mutual funds. We didn't go over that. And then there's some examples here. When you hit create new, I'd suggest or recommend that you may want to look through some of these. So we do have, for example, some examples here with some stocks screening, if you do focus on equities, with different criteria that you can filter for. Let me move on. We had a question during the registration. A bunch of you asked, how do you look at ETF valuations? So ETF valuation is something that we recently launched. And so one of the ways to look at ETF valuations is you can create a watch list of ETFs. So if I have my ETFs here, what I can do is I can then, let me just start a new column here. I will call this ETF valuation. You could go in here and then start selecting different valuations. So if I wanted to look at, for example, the P ratio, which is going to be up here, NTM, LTM, go back. And let's say I wanted to look at the EV to sales ratio, LTM, NTM. And let's say I want to look at the price to book ratio, X. I now have all the ratios here for all my ETFs. So we did start ingesting and calculating all these really interesting valuation measures. For bonds, obviously, it's not available, or these are equity valuation measures. And so for bonds, we do have kind of the duration and the average credit rating. But for equities, this information, this information is available for you to look at. The other thing that we're releasing pretty shortly is this is the latest valuation for an ETF. You obviously want to look at this historically. So we are going to allow you to look at this historically in the security analysis. So this isn't out right now, but it should be out in the next week, I'd say. Wanted to show you kind of how that works. You don't have access to this. This is our dev server, which you wouldn't have access unless you work at Koyfin. But if you have under security analysis, SPY here, you put an ETF and you go to graphs. This is now the P ratio of the SPY. And you'd be able to kind of look at some statistical bands like mean and one standard deviation, and be able to kind of like see where we are today relative to the past 20 years. So over the past 20 years, we're a little bit above where the average is, sort of one standard deviation above. And then over the past 10 years, we are right kind of like at the mean. So the mean is 18.3 times. The P ratio is 18.9 times of the S&P. And so we're right kind of like at the average. And so then you have to have the conversation or think about the analysis of, why are we higher? Are margins higher? Where are rates? All the kind of fun stuff that you have to think about when you think about valuation and macro things. But at least this will give you the data to start having that conversation or start having an assessment. That's our job, is to kind of give you that clean data. And then it's your job to make a decision based on that data and based on your views on what's going to happen going forward and the risk rewards and stuff like that. So that's the ETF valuation stuff. That's going to be out over the next week. We'll make an announcement. Right now in your platform, you'll have it in the watch lists. And then you'll be able to graph it in the graph over the next week or so. Let me just pause here to just look at the questions. So when you integrate with Morningstar, will you have their star ratings? I'm not sure. I think we will, but I'm not sure. I'll have to check on that. I know we'll have a link to the Morningstar report. So we'll kind of link out to the Morningstar report, but I'm not sure if we'll have the ratings there. And then Bill is asking if we're gonna have a VWAP. This is a really interesting kind of technical indicator that I know is used by forget the guy's name, Brian Shannon. Thank you. We don't have it today. I don't have timing on that, just because it's such a specific indicator for technical analysis that a lot of our audience isn't focused on technical analysis. I know, Bill, you've been using our platform for a long time and are a little bit more of a technical analyst than most people. We want to include it. I don't have a time frame on it. It's not something that is very widely requested. If there's any others on the call that would like to see anchored VWAP, let me know, and maybe we can prioritize that a little bit higher. All right, so next on the agenda is wanted to show you ETF and mutual snapshots. This is something that's really interesting and kind of unique to Koyfin, particularly on the holding snapshot. So the security analysis here on the left-hand side, this is where you type in security, and then you have sort of the different snapshots available for it. The overview snapshot, just high-level overview of the security and some fund flows. Description snapshot in terms of the description and high-level information on fees for the ETF. This is the thing that's kind of a little bit more differentiated to Koyfin and the analysis that we do. So this is looking at the holdings breakdown of all the constituents. So just kind of a chart of the holdings weight and the return. Obviously, the higher the return, the bigger the weight, the bigger the contribution. And so you could see kind of which stocks are really driving the Qs this year. Let me actually change this to SPY. It'll be more interesting. So you can see here, SPY, NVIDIA year to date is up over 200%. It's a 3% weighting, so it's really punching a lot of the contribution in the market year to date. Meta as well, and then some of the smaller stocks. GE, even though it's up almost 100%, it's really small part of the index, so it's not contributing all that much. And then we take this analysis and then break it down here. Weight times return equals contribution. So you could actually see the quantify the return contribution of each stock. So NVIDIA is contributing 243 basis points year to date. The SPY is up 15% or 1,500 basis points. Or is it no? Yes, 1,500 basis points. And so that kind of this is this divided by this is kind of the percentage contribution. So if you add up NVIDIA and Apple and Microsoft and Meta and Amazon and Tesla, that's pretty much explaining the year-to-date contribution of or the year-to-date performance of the S&P 500. So kind of when people are saying the largest stocks are driving the performance of the S&P, that's definitely the case, and you could quantify that if you sort of download this and add up these stocks, the top 5 or 10 stocks. They are driving all the return year to date in the S&P 500. So interesting observation. And then the contribution can also be broken out by sector. So we see exactly kind of year to date, the SPY is up again 50%. 10 percentage points or 973 basis points is contributed by tech. 342 is consumer services, where I believe, communication services, which I believe is Google and some others, and then consumer discretionary, where Amazon is kind of the other one. So this is a really nice way to see which sectors are outperforming and underperforming, and you could see that by industry as well. You could also do that for mutual funds. So if I had Fidelity Magellan Fund and I wanted to see what the holdings were and what the contributions were, I could do that as well and go through that same analysis. And then on the charting side, if you're not using our kind of charting for these returns, that's something that's very popular with investors. So if you wanted to compare, TLT versus CL1 versus kind of like whatever you're looking at, this is a great way to do that in terms of looking at the performance. You could zoom in, zoom out very easily to change the time frame. You could change the time frame here. You could then print this as a chart. So if I wanted to share this, I can make this a chart and then copy image to email it. I could add a logo here. So if I wanted to add a logo to my chart, I would upload the image, give this a title, maybe, asset returns. And that would be a really nice chart to kind of put in a blog post or tweet or whatever it is. And so we have a special chart here for performance, which is just the performance of whatever you put here. You can put a stock, ETF, mutual fund. We also have a historical graph where you can be a little bit more precise on what you're graphing. So if I wanted to graph Fidelity Magellan Fund versus the US yield curve, 10-year, 2-year, if that's kind of like the analysis I wanted to do, I can look at those two series and then move them around as I wanted to. So if I wanted to create a new chart here, there's an icon in the legend here which sends this to a new chart. And I'm going to hover over it and show you. And so now these are two separate charts, but you can literally graph any economic data or any performance data or anything that's on Koyfin. You can graph in the G chart. And a great way to search for series on Koyfin is you could kind of search for it here in the search box. We also have an advanced search here where you could search for securities. So if I wanted to look at for inflation, I can really start narrowing down. So economic, and then show all countries, United States. And this would give me a way to search for tickers if you wanted to search for economic tickers or yield curves. And then the other thing you could do is really just browse our market dashboards where we have some of these asset classes organized for you. So if you wanted to look at yield curves, you could kind of go here and see all these yield curves and how they're organized. If you wanted to look at commodities, you could kind of go here and see how these commodities are organized and see the tickers. If you wanted to look at global yields or look at the factors we have, you could do that as well, and use these market dashboards as a way to browse the market and see what's going on. Okay, so I have spoken for quite a bit here. I will pause to see if anyone has any questions. No questions at this time. If you want to put in the chat, maybe if there was one feature that we can, if you could snap your finger and Koyfin can create one feature for you. If you want to put that in the chat, let me know. That would help us kind of get some feedback from our users, and we would prioritize some of the stuff. So Chris has a question in terms of sharing or reporting for portfolio models. Yep. So we're gonna do sharing for models. We're also gonna do kind of some asset or PDF reports that users can then put into the send their clients. So we'll have both sharing and reporting of models. Cool, James. Great suggestion on customization of the front page. You can right now do something which is a little bit different, not what you want to do. So what you want to do is basically customize what this looks like. And I definitely understand this. This is something that we created. So you may want to look at things that aren't commodities or emerging markets or whatever it is. What you could do today is think about this My Dashboards feature. And be able to kind of like, if you click new under My Dashboards and start with a blank canvas, you can set up your own kind of watch list of different tables. So if I wanted to have two different tables, I could create them here and then create a new watch list here called let's say it's my pre and post market indices, and now I have my pre and post market indices. In here, I could have my ETFs that I looked at before with different views. So this is a way to set up your own custom dashboard with different widgets. And you could bookmark this dashboard in your browser, a little bit different than what you're asking for, which I totally understand we'll get to, but right now that's sort of the way to do it. Cool. Anything else before we wrap up? Awesome. Well, thanks everyone so much for attending the webinar. We will send the recording again. Thank you for being a Koyfin user. If we could do anything for you, please let us know. Have a great day and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.